If you think you can write something better, then do it with today's sponsor, Campfire, links all down below. I love Legend of Korra, and it's fine if you don't, but that's the truth of it. It's full of great characters and stories and gorgeous animation that will always stay with me. Hell, Season 3 is just as good, if not better than The Last Airbender at times. But it's also not perfect, and that's fine. No story is. And there are any number of reasons for that. There was a lot of studio interference, screwing with the show by cutting their budget mid-production, forcing them to change production companies, sabotaging their viewership by moving them online, and yeah, there were also some odd/mixed/bad writing choices. But that's why today we're gonna fix Season 1, which features Korra's best antagonist, V for Vendetta. Here are the rules. 1. I have to do it in the same 12 episodes. They wrote it thinking they would not get a second season, so we will too. 2, we are fixing the story, not rewriting it entirely. It's really easy to be that person who goes, well, you should have just done an entirely different story. But no. There are a myriad of complicated reasons that the story turned out the way it did, that you and I will probably never quite understand. So we are gonna fix and change things, yeah, but we're working to elevate that story. I see 3 main issues with the first season. 1, they didn't establish or give enough consequences to the oppression of non-benders. 2, the love triangle conflict doesn't really work that well, so we need something else. And 3, Korra's arc is meant to be about her learning who she is without her bending, and Amon taking it away is a huge part of that, but we just don't get enough time to explore it deeply. But before you hear my ideas, tell me how you would rewrite the series down below. Episode 1, Welcome to Republic City. The season opens with Korra living a contained, controlled life under the watchful eye of the White Lotus. She has a good grip on firebending, waterbending, and earthbending, but not airbending, and we see she relies a lot on her passion and anger and independence as she fights and moves. She's strong, says Katara, but she lacks restraint. Korra, on the other hand, is stoked. 3 elements down, barely an adult and ready to face the world. She longs for freedom and to do what the Avatar is meant to do, right? Fight injustice. This is the foundation for Korra's character arc. She's a prodigy who has had most things come to her in life easily. She's the chief's daughter, the prestige, the power. It's made her impulsive, a little unempathetic, and makes her easily frustrated when she can't get things quickly, as well as overly reliant on violence and action rather than listening and understanding. Tenzin and his family arrive in the Southern Water Tribe, with Korra expecting him to teach her about airbending and the spiritual side of being the Avatar, only to reveal Republic City is unstable, with tensions between benders and non-benders, and because of that, her training will need to wait. Korra insists that just means that's where she needs to be, the place with injustice and imbalance, but Tenzin refuses and leaves. That night, Korra escapes with Naga on a ship bound for Republic City. Upon arriving in Republic City, Korra is astounded. She's never seen so many bright lights before, but she soon finds herself in the poorest parts of the city, filled with the homeless, the drug-afflicted, the impoverished. She sees a bending police squadron clearing out a city park, first peacefully and then with more of a threat. The non-benders scatter. In another place, one group tries to light a fire, and to announce herself as the Avatar arriving in the city, she conjures a fire for them and seeks to sit down. But when Korra asks why none of them started a fire, because surely one of them must be a firebender, they scoff. They're all non-benders. You think you'll find a firebender down here? Make do, make mend, an old man says. The others look at her nervously, as if they're a little worried she might come after them, but Korra, confused as to why people aren't excited at her arrival, leaves, only for a triple triad gang member to begin extorting the group. Korra, inflamed with righteous anger, turns back to save the non-benders, and does so, but destroys the surrounding neighborhood in the process, the place these people clearly called home, and nobody thanks her. Korra then enters a wealthier part of the city, but is stopped by a bender. I saw where you came from. I don't want thieves around these parts. The police close in around her, asking if there's any trouble, but when she threatens him with bending, the man backs off. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were one of them. One of the major criticisms of Season 1 was that it didn't show the inequality between benders and non-benders enough. We see a gang exploiting one person, and that the council is maybe ruled entirely by benders, but not much else. We don't see real systemic issues that demand real systemic reform. This is one attempt to do that, to show a city divided into pseudo-classes with a deep cultural association of non-benders with stealing and crime, something we see in the real world leading to classist divides and creating stereotypes. I also wanted to show a systemic bias from the police to assist benders over non-benders, being benders themselves. That it's not like the average bender is going out of their way to hunt down non-benders, but it's a lot more subtle in this society. The episode ends with Korra finding the pro-bending arena, this monolithic building that everyone seems to be heading towards, and she also finds one of Amon's pamphlets. Equality, it reads. At which point Tenzin flies down to intercept her, blocking her path. You know, word travels quickly when the Avatar's in town, he says, a little frustrated. We then get a cutaway scene of Amon learning that the Avatar has arrived in the city as well, and that they must accelerate their plans. Episode 2, A Leaf in the Wind. Tenzin takes Korra to Air Temple Island, away from the pro-bending arena, much to her protestation, insisting that she return home, but she refuses. Tenzin storms away, frustrated. Korra then connects with Pema, Jinora, and Iki, who try to teach her some basic airbending techniques. She doesn't learn much, but when Tenzin returns and spies Korra trying to learn, Pema comes up behind him and encourages him to let Korra stay. Tenzin goes to her. I can't believe you followed me all this way when I specifically told you not to, but I'm impressed, so long as we can put that determination to good use with your studies. Korra punches the air, firebolts all around, ecstatic. That night, Korra has her first dream of Aang in the past, those flashbacks to Yukon. And like in the show, she's just going to get more of those dreams. The following day, Tenzin takes Korra for her first lesson. He impresses on her that airbending is about attaining full control over yourself, your emotions, your body, by detaching yourself from the world and the things that affect you, not holding on to the past, and allowing yourself to change, not holding on to one idea of themselves. A freezing gust of wind hits them and Korra shivers, but Tenzin explains that they can even control their body temperature with careful use of their breath, which is why it didn't affect him. And keep that in mind because we're just gonna set that aside for later. Korra tries to airbend, but she doesn't move with the world around her. She relies on punching and kicking, asserting herself on the world around her, and as a result, she's beaten in that spinning boards test. She tries again and again and again, but fails every single time, getting more and more frustrated. She is not used to taking this long to get what is in her mind a very simple thing. At the end of the lesson, Tenzin tells her firmly that detaching oneself includes things like pro-bending, and he forbids her from going. Bitter from having tried and gotten nowhere, Korra sneaks out with Jinora to go and see the pro-bending tournament. As in the show, she meets Mako and Bolin, who are down a member, and she fills in. Tenzin arrives, furious, but sees Korra putting the lessons he tried to teach her into practice in her own way during the tournament. And he starts to understand that she might have to learn this stuff on her own terms. Episode 3, The Revelation. Tarlok, another counselor in Republic City, watched Korra perform and approaches her after the game. You must be the Avatar. I've heard you're a natural, a true prodigy. He encourages her to join the council sometime, to sit in and hear about the politics of the city. With the instability between benders and non-benders, that'd be good to have the Avatar to help maintain order. I heard you dealt with this yourself firsthand, and I commend you. Korra wants to, loving this praise, but Tenzin insists that she stay out of politics. It's here they're also approached by Asami, a non-bender and the owner of Hiroshi Industries.
So there's no Hiroshi Sato in this rewrite, which I guess makes it Asami Industries, and that's because of our first major change. Asami is an equalist, though she doesn't reveal that.
She offers to sponsor them, noting it'd be well worth having the Avatar's face for her company.
Korra immediately hits it off with Asami, this charming, beautiful girl from a whole other world to her, who admires her skills and says that she sees value in the Avatar.
And Mako initially refuses, insisting that they don't need her money, but Bolin presses that, well, they're not gonna make it very far without it. Reluctantly, Mako agrees. Korra wonders why Mako was so opposed to taking Asami's money, to which they explain that their mother was murdered by a group of Republic City non-benders during the riots a year ago, apparently when this instability really kicked off, and that since then Mako has found it difficult to trust non-benders. He describes a non-bender with a prosthetic leg and scarred arm that he remembers the man's face and swears he will find him one day. Korra asks what he's going to do, and Mako says nothing. I wanted to introduce this change because, to be perfectly honest, Mako isn't that interesting in the first series. Bolin is likable and delivers comedic relief and heart to the story. Korra is an interesting, conflicted character with a real arc. But Mako is brooding without much of a reason, no obvious flaw or goal to overcome in this story.
He's a dollar shop Zuko.
Here, Mako's trauma in the past, and it's a trauma that does exist in the story, we're just modifying it a little bit. It really plays into the current narrative conflict, and it provides a personal bias and arc for him to overcome. His prejudice against non-benders. It's just enough to enforce those social divides and give a face to one side of it. Taking out Amon's pamphlet that she found at the end of the first episode, Korra insists that they look more into this divide, these equalists, this guy called Amon, especially if Tenzin isn't going to let her get involved in politics. As in the show, they piece together where it's happening and go to find the rally. Here, Amon reveals himself. He gives this brilliant speech about bending being the source of suffering and war in the world, and removes the bending of those same gang members who Korra fought at the beginning, as well as a couple of the policemen that she saw. Impulsively, Korra leaps up onto the stage to rescue the remaining victims, horrified at the idea of losing her own bending. She fights Amon and his right-hand man, referred to only as the Lieutenant, who, like Amon, keeps his face hidden, but it goes terribly. And she has to be rescued by Tenzin and Tarlok and Beifong's police force. In the course of that rescue though, Korra witnesses some kind of police brutality. People are arrested for simply attending this rally. All of this only hardens Mako's resolve, that they need harsher measures to deal with the Equalists. In the aftermath, Lin Beifong rails against Korra for acting unilaterally like that they knew about the meeting and they were monitoring it from afar until she had to go and jump up and ruin everything. She coins it as typical teenage Avatar entitlement and ignorance, not knowing how things really work in a city like this, while Korra says that at least she did something, at least she tried to save people. Tarlok, however, insists on forgiveness. It is the Avatar, after all. Tenzin takes her away, but he's also angry, and although he empathizes with her frustration, he insists that the situation is complicated and it needs to be left to the professionals. Professionals? I'm the Avatar, what's more professional than that, she cries. But the episode closes out. Episode 4, To Fight or Not to Fight. Tenzin tries to teach Korra more airbending, but Korra can't focus with everything going on. She just wants to go out and help with this stuff. She insists that the world gave her the 4 elements for a reason, not just airbending, and at least she can use 3 of them to do something good and bring Amon to justice. There are also further reports of benders disappearing off the streets. Korra sits down with Bolin and talks about how she just wants to help people, that she hates sitting around when she knows there's so much wrong in the world, and she's just not sure how to help. Bolin tells her that sometimes you've gotta fight, yeah, but sometimes you've just gotta listen and learn, and sometimes you've gotta wait before you can really make a difference. Meanwhile, Mako tries to find an Equalist hideout. Asami comes across him while looking for Korra and offers to help, and he refuses it. But after struggling and getting nowhere, he reluctantly accepts the help, beginning to trust non-benders again. He even flirts with her and the two get along and laugh. And, in turn, she provides a map of the city's underground infrastructure, tunnels and buildings, even the power grid, able to nail down where they might be by an unusual consumption of power.
Asami insists that Korra and Bolin go with Mako if he really wants to do this, to help keep him safe,
while Asami stays behind, insisting that, although she wants to help them, she doesn't want her company to get caught up in a turf war. Sure enough though, they find a huge weapons cache of these new electric gloves that the Equalists plan to use, but before they can call in Beifong, they're ambushed by the Lieutenant, who electrifies Mako and Bolin. Korra only just manages to fight her way out with them, and realizing the Equalists must be planning something big if they're collecting weapons like this, Korra challenges Amon on the city-wide radio system to a duel at Big Angface Island, which plays out exactly as it does in the show. It's a brilliant scene, genuinely one of my favorites in the entire show, with Amon taking her down easily and promising that he won't take away her bending yet, because he has plans. Episode 5, A Voice in the Night. Korra is shaken by her confrontation with Amon, and returning to Air Temple Island, she's suddenly starting to internalize for the very first time that she isn't necessarily the most powerful person in the world. Tenzin counsels Korra and tells her about how fragile he feels as well, that as one of the last airbenders in the world, and at one point the only airbender in the world, that it was a big responsibility, and for a long time that was all he could ever see himself as, the last airbender, until Jinora and Iki and Pema came along, and he started to see himself as more than that, as a father. He links this in with airbending by explaining that it's a lot to do with finding peace with oneself, not defining ourselves by what we can do for the world, by the role that we are born into, but recognizing we are valuable outside of that. Korra internalizes this a little, and even manages to learn some more airbending movements, but confesses that she doesn't know who she is outside of the Avatar. That is all she has ever been, that is all anyone has ever really seen her as. And she's terrified of Amon because of that. Even pro-bending is based off her powers, and she thinks that Mako and Bolin would drop her without them. Mako and Bolin, overhearing her, assure her that this isn't the case. "We love you because you're fiery, you're our friend," and Pabu comes up and sits on top of her head. But following that very escalation, Tarlok opens a special task force with more powers to deal with the Equalists. Beifong opposes this, but Tarlok tells her that it isn't her business. This is a council decision. It's for the safety of the city. Mako joins the task force, but Bolin steps aside, saying, "No, hey, this is going too far for me." That yeah, he's scared as well, but this will only make things worse between benders and non-benders, and it'll only make Amon bolder. One of the most common criticisms of Season 1 is that the love triangle between Bolin and Korra and Mako is distracting, and, you know, to be honest, it doesn't actually take up that much time. I rewatched the series, it's not that invasive, and it does make sense for Korra as someone who is developing her independence for the first time. She wants these kind of experiences. But it is also the only real character conflict within the trio, and I don't think it's a particularly great example of that. And I think that this would be a more interesting conflict. It's drawing on their traumatic history together, but it also deepens that wider conflict, giving more room for growth and personalizing it. Especially because neither of those romances really come to much in the end. Feeling a lack of purpose and fearing failure, Korra joins Tarlok in hopes of reasserting her sense of self-worth, her role as the Avatar. Bolin and Asami are disappointed, and a rift develops in the group. At an operation that night, they burst into an Equalist facility, and once again, they face the Lieutenant. Mako is initially happy to see some success, rescuing a number of benders who are being kept for Amon, but he begins to question his feelings towards non-benders after watching more brutality at the hands of the Special Task Force, even targeting people who just happen to be in the building, suspicions of them being Equalists, with a group of harmless civilians also being rounded up for questioning. And the apartment building they're raiding itself also partially collapses during the fight. When Mako goes to Tarlok about this though, the council just insists that it's crucial for law and order, and that they had intel that Equalists would try to hide like this, hide amongst civilians. Mako looks away, nods, but reaffirms his dedication to the task force. Episode 6, and the winner is... This episode plays out basically exactly the same as in the show. I think it was pretty good. Amon warns that if the pro-bending final isn't cancelled, there will be consequences. Beifong and Tarlok swear to protect the stadium, the Wolfbats win with foul play, and the Equalists attack. Amon descends from the sky, removes the Wolfbats' bending, and though they fight, the Equalists do escape. Only one tiny change I will mention. In the midst of the fight, Korra tears off a section of the Lieutenant's clothing, revealing a tattoo of a small white rabbit. Korra would have gotten a hold of Amon if not for the Lieutenant shocking her at the last minute, watching her as they ascend into the sky before they escape. Episode 7, Aftermath. Following the terrorist attack at the pro-bending arena, Tarlok calls for Beifong's resignation and institutes a curfew for non-benders, exploiting the tragedy to gain more power. He has an iron grip on the council. Korra feels conflicted, but doesn't speak up. Bolin opposes the measures, saying that they're going too far, and that rift in the group becomes a fallout between the two brothers, with Mako staying on the task force.
Asami comforts Korra, listens to her worries, and insists that there is a right thing to do here, and that the Avatar is meant to be a force for good in the world. Korra just says that she doesn't know what that right thing is to do some of the time. And Asami says she thinks Tarlok is getting out of hand.
That night, the curfew is enforced, and we get that iconic scene where the woman calls out to Korra, "You're our Avatar too." Realizing that she has been acting impulsively, and that's led to horrible consequences for non-benders, Korra decides to stand up to Tarlok. Mako doesn't know which side he should choose. Unwilling to turn to violence around so many people, knowing that that's been an issue in the past, Korra backs down.
Here, we see that Korra is growing. She is internalizing that she needs to find other ways to solve her problems, but she isn't quite understanding how she's meant to implement that, and that sometimes has negative consequences.
At midnight, Korra finds Tarlok in his office, wanting to finish what they started out on the streets, insisting that things have gone too far, and that she was so concerned about Amon when she should have been concerned about Tarlok. They fight, and she gets the upper hand, until he reveals he's a bloodbender. He imprisons her in his cellar in a metal box, something that he prepared in case she ever turned on him. The following day, Mako goes to the grave of his mother, killed by a non-bender not too long ago. Feeling conflicted on what to do, he talks to her about how he's feeling and wonders what she would say. There, he finds Asami though, as well. She's grieving for her own father, who was killed by a bender around the same time during those very same riots. They confide in each other, these similar experiences between benders and non-benders, but Asami looks like she's holding something back. She almost starts to talk when Mako says that things should turn out fine soon. The Tarlok and the task force know where Amon is, and they've got a plan to take down the Equalists really damn soon. He asks what she was thinking, but she says it was nothing and leaves. Episode 8, When Extremes Meet. It's the early morning when Amon himself comes to face Tarlok, who thinks he has the entire city in his iron grip. "You shouldn't have come here. I just dealt with the Avatar, now I get to deal with you," he says. But as he tries to bloodbend Amon resists, taking one hard step forward at a time and then turning his own bloodbending on him. "It's you, isn't it?" Tarlok says when he realizes whom he faces, and the counselor is brought to his knees, his bending removed. In the early morning, explosions rack Republic City. Important infrastructure is either seized or destroyed by a rapid series of attacks by the Equalists. One by one, they capture the counselors and begin rounding up benders. Tenzin is drawn into an ambush with a fake message from Korra, but he only just manages to escape when Lin Beifong sacrifices herself for him. She's dragged before Amon and loses her bending. We see the tight bond that these two have always had, their history together. Asami breaks Korra out, explaining the city is under attack and she needs to come with her immediately, before Korra notices the exact same white rabbit tattoo of the lieutenant. Asami is one of them and always has been. Before she can fight, Asami shocks Korra unconscious.
Asami being an Equalist is a really important change for me. In the show, as it stands, there is no protagonist that we really like, who is empathetic, who personifies and legitimizes those Equalist concerns. There's Hiroshi, but he's a minor character at best, and he's treated pretty explicitly as a villain. All of our protagonists are set in opposition to equalism, and even Asami, a non-bender who suffered the very same loss as Hiroshi, has no sympathy for it, which kind of gives the viewer permission to ignore equalist concerns, and it feeds into that problem of not showing it to be a legitimate systemic issue. I felt like they were worried that having Asami be an equalist might make us hate her, but so they substituted it for her father, but I think this betrayal is so much more meaningful. We legitimize those concerns, we make Asami more interesting, and we deepen the character conflict of the story.
Korra wakes amidst a massive equalist rally, the city finally having fallen under their control, bound against a pole on the stage. Amon gives a speech about the Avatar being the ultimate tyrant. The Avatar thinks they can decide the fate of nations by themselves, deciding for you, for all of us, for all the world, and in their wake they leave a trail of destruction while leaving the rest of us to pick up the pieces. Need I remind you of your homes reduced to cinders by her fire, broken by her earth-bending, while the immense power of the Avatar state is left to the whims and emotion of an unstable child. While he speaks, you see the neighborhood that Korra destroyed at the beginning, the apartment facility brought down by the special task force, and the crowd erupts in applause. Need I remind you of Avatar Aang's destruction of the Fire Nation fleet during the 100-Year War, that non-benders were sent to die in a bender's war, and he gave them no thought or care. Korra spies Mako and Bolin in the audience, but they're too far away. Amon has Korra untied and says, "I want you to see that you're no threat to me even with your powers. Let us fight, Avatar." And she tries, but she loses. He gets in close, and her bending is removed. Republic City's benders go into hiding. Amon lets Korra go. "You're no threat to us now. You're one of us." Despondent, Korra gives up. Bolin finds her. He tries to empathize, but she insists that she is nothing anymore, and she leaves the city. Mako yells after her, "What, you're just gonna leave the rest of us to fight it out? You're the Avatar!" "Not anymore," she says quietly. "I'm nothing." This is, in my opinion, the most important change. Season 1 has the perfect setup. Korra defines herself by her powers and her position as the Avatar, and she is faced with an enemy who can take that away from her. But there simply isn't enough time to explore who she is without her powers. We get barely half an episode in the original series between her losing her bending and getting it back, and as a result, her airbending feels less earned than it could have been. The principle is there, don't get me wrong, that she only learns airbending when she grows spiritually and personally, and taking away her powers is a vital way to do that. But the lack of time to explore that means it feels more like she airbends because she simply got more emotional seeing Mako about to lose his powers too. And being too driven by her emotions and relying too much on punching and anger was always a character flaw. But this would, with several episodes still to go, hopefully give her enough time. Episode 9, Darkest Hour. Republic City is at war. Most of the city lies under Equalist control, while a small group of benders still hold out, but the rest are in hiding. Mako pretends to be a non-bender to avoid the roaming Equalist forces. He's nearly caught, only to be rescued by a non-bender, who hides him in their closet. He asks why she would help him, and she explains that, yeah, she supports the Equalist movement, but doesn't think that he deserves to lose his bending, that she got behind the movement before that was a thing. He sees her washing from a bucket and asks about why she doesn't use tap water. "Everyone in the city has it," he says. "Ha, not us. Not down here," she says, and Mako stays silent, starting to see what life is like for them. Korra walks out into the freezing wilderness, up to a cliff face overlooking Republic City.
She contemplates her existence and purpose in the world now.
The same way that she does at the end of the series, believing herself worth nothing anymore. But she steps back, unable to do it, and slacks to the ground. She cries out to Aang, "What am I meant to do? Who am I meant to be?" When no visions or voices come, she concludes that the Avatar state has left her too. Why would you want to talk to me anymore, right? Korra, the last Avatar. Meanwhile, Bolin and Beifong organize a measure of resistance. Tenzin is concerned for his family, but he's also worrying about Korra. He doesn't know where she is. Tenzin warns that things are only going to get worse before they get better, no matter who ends up on top, and he regrets not acting to support the non-benders sooner. Bolin volunteers to go find Korra, saying the city needs Beifong, the chief of police, and Tenzin, one of the last airbenders, more than they would need him if he gets captured. Korra returns to Republic City, to those same lowest, poorest parts that she found when she first arrived. She sees an old man being hassled and she clenches her fist, the muscle memory expecting there to be fire or earth, but there's nothing. She turns away, feeling helpless, and slips down an alleyway to find an old, ruined apartment building to hide in. Even the same one that she helped destroy. Bolin finds Korra with the help of Naga, who follows her scent. Naga cuddles in close and Bolin hugs her. The two just sit there in silence together. Korra unable to explain how she feels. Bolin brings out a Pai Sho game and they play together. Korra wins, but Bolin just laughs, saying it's good to have someone to play with. She asks why he came to find her, and he insists that he cares about her, and so does Naga. He then shows her a small rock carving that he did, and not with bending, mind you, he says, but with my hands. He teaches Korra to chip and carve for a while, and Korra finds that she enjoys that too. See? There's a lot more to you than your bending. And I care about you for a lot more than that. Even if we never did another pro bending tournament again, I still want to be your friend. Episode 10, Out of the Past. Regaining a little self-esteem, Korra decides to meditate and put some of Tenzin's teachings into practice alone. She heads up to the rooftop. It's snowing, it's windy and cold, but she sits down to meditate anyway. And when the wind stills around her, and she stops shivering, using her breath to control her body temperature, she realizes that she has just airbent for the first time. Korra leaps into the air, cheering for herself, and Bolin bursts out onto the rooftop, scared that something had just happened. The two then spot an explosion in the distance. I have to face Amon, Korra declares. But first, we need to talk to someone. And this is something that I prepared earlier. Remember the whole breathing control thing? Yeah, there you go. And to be clear, I would actually prefer this to take even longer, like if we had multiple seasons to play with, but we don't. Korra and Bolin sneak into Asami's mansion using those same maps that she gave Mako all that time ago. A special tunnel that leads under her property. There they find Tarlok locked up, and when he says that his bending is gone, they wonder why he's still being kept here. After all, he let Korra go. Tarlok reveals it's because he knows who Amon is. And we get that full flashback about Noatok straight out of the series. Tarlok is his brother, and Yukon, a ruthless bender, is their father. With only one change. Yukon leaves Noatok with a brutal scar across his face in his final fight. Korra finally understands Aang's visions. He was pointing her all this time towards Yukon. Episode 11, Turning the Tide. Korra and Bolin confront Asami in her home, demanding she explain why she betrayed them. I betrayed you? She exclaims. You betrayed me when you joined Tarlok's task force, when you saw what they were doing and you did nothing. All we wanted was to be treated like equals, not an underclass. Bolin turns it around. But I mean, look at you. You made it. You're wealthier than any of us will ever be. And Asami's eyes narrow, but Korra speaks up. But that's it, right? It's so easy to point to you and think everything's... But it's not. I know you're the exception, and then there's all the rest who never made it. But this isn't how we fix it, right? We don't have to get rid of bending. It's just gonna mean more fighting, more resentment. There are other ways. What ways? Asami asks. I just want to understand, presses Korra. Asami softens for a moment, then hardens and seizes up her electric weapons to attack. A fight ensues, and Korra doesn't reveal her airbending, relying on those airbending moves to avoid and dodge, just like Tenzin taught her. Meanwhile, a fight breaks out in Mako's part of Republic City between a group of benders and equalists. It begins to destabilize the neighborhood as benders tear up the foundations and equalists start an electric fire. As Mako looks out, he sees the man who he thinks killed his mother, spotting that prosthetic leg at a distance. Mako watches from the apartment building above and initially wants to leap into the fray to go after the man. Before he sees all of the people in the nearby buildings are in danger, the fire is climbing higher, and when he looks back at the old woman who saved him, he realizes what he needs to do. Mako begins saving everyone, this group of non-benders, from the growing fire, using his bending to put it out and get them to safety. You don't have to fight, the old woman tells him after saving the last one. You can just leave. Mako catches the eye of the man that murdered his mother, and they stare at each other from across the fray, and Mako turns away, both from vengeance and from violence, at least this time. Returning to Korra and Bolin, Bolin carves a way out of the mansion, and the two escape into the poorer parts of the city. Episode 12, Endgame. Korra and Bolin eventually come across Mako, who is safeguarding a group of non-benders amidst the conflict. Mako almost brings himself to apologize to Bolin for getting so caught up in his anger and frustration following their mother's death, but doesn't when Korra reveals that Asami is an equalist, and that feeling of betrayal and anger returns and intensifies for him. Flyers are dropped from the sky calling for a huge equalist rally in the pro-bending arena, where Amon states that an historic event is about to take place. The trio rush to the pro-bending arena, and they see Amon and Asami down on the stage, and they reveal that they have captured Tenzin and his family, just like we see in the show. And we realise that this historic event will mean wiping out airbending forever. Asami glances to the side while Amon speaks about removing airbending from the world. She's uncomfortable, but she stands by him. "The revolution is here," Amon says, but Korra interrupts. Amon assures the crowd that they have nothing to fear, and that even if he should die, his right-hand man, Asami, would succeed her to finish the fight. And just like in the show, Korra reveals his secrets. "Amon has been lying to you, or should I call you Noatok? Amon doesn't have a special power to take away bending, he uses blood bending to do it." But the crowds just don't believe her. In response, Amon reveals his face, rippled and scarred from an attack by a bender. Except, unlike in the show, the scar is real, it isn't painted, and it won't wash off. It is from his father Yukon, even if it was when he wasn't a bender. It always irritated me that the Equalist movement kind of fell apart after seeing Amon's scar melt away, as if realizing that because Amon lied to them about something, it meant that the non-benders' concerns just didn't matter anymore. It just felt like a cheap way to destroy the movement. But knowing Amon would be reluctant to use bloodbending in front of so many people, Mako, Korra, and Bolin move in to rescue Tenzin and the other airbenders. Korra unties the others while Mako and Bolin hold them off, and they flee into the corridors of the pro-bending arena, up to the roof. Tenzin gets his family out on a sky bison piloted by the nervous Beifong. Mako, Bolin, and Korra turn to face Amon, who has followed them up and burst out onto the roof. Out of sight of the public, Amon isn't afraid to bloodbend, and he quickly subdues both Bolin and Mako. "Not gonna bloodbend me too," Korra yells. "I am not afraid of you, Avatar. You have already been neutralized." Amon shoves Bolin to his knees, about to remove his bending, when Korra reveals her airbending, shunting Amon to the ground. Tenzin watches from afar. "She can airbend," he says, cheering her on. "You've grown, Avatar," says Amon, "but I assure you, even if you kill me, it'll just be fuel on the fire of equalism. But I see I need to teach you a lesson again." Shocked but not defeated, Amon bloodbends her as well, but Korra, having a new mastery over her body thanks to her airbending training,
is able to move just enough to get in one more airbending move,
knocking Amon unconscious and removing his mask. Asami bursts out onto the roof and shocks Bolin in the back. Seeing Amon down, she leaps into the fight with Mako and Korra, dodging bending attack after bending attack. She too is taken by surprise with Korra's airbending, but eventually gets the upper hand on Mako. Furious at Mako's treatment of non-benders, she pins him down to the ground, but remembers back to him telling her about his mother, and she telling him about her father. Korra begs Asami to stop, that it's over, that they can solve this another way, and Asami steps back and sighs. "Tell me how," she says. Asami appears in front of the rally and holds up Amon's broken mask and declares to the crowd, "Amon has fallen, but in his last moments he bought us what we have all been fighting for. A better world for non-benders like you, like me. Too long has the world treated us like second-class citizens. We don't want to live in the shadows of our own city. We need jobs. We need a voice in the way our city is run."
And with his last breath, Amon bought us what we have been fighting for, what we need.
"Republic City will no longer be ruled by a council of benders, but all of you will vote for who should lead us."
And as part of this peace, she pauses with a deep breath, looking back at Korra. "We will govern without the Avatar."
Shocked gasps abound when this is revealed, because Korra wasn't expecting this either. She wasn't told. Asami seems to have decided this for herself. But Beifong, having arrived during the negotiation, steps up and Asami continues. "We have shown the world that with this new technology we can bring order to Republic City, that thugs and bending tyrants are no longer a threat to us. The police force has for far too long been dominated by benders who didn't know what it was like for you, for us. But with this new technology, non-benders will ensure equality before the law too." Asami goes on. "Do not let the world say that we want blood. We want equality.
And for that, we do not need the Avatar. The Avatar will leave Republic City immediately. The crowd cheers for Korra to go, who is shocked by Asami's sudden reveal. They had agreed to a peace, but not to this.
Backstage, Korra says that she could have done the speech, that she is the Avatar after all, but Asami insists that a non-bender had to do it, that sometimes people need to solve their own problems. I'm the Avatar, I'm meant to help. You're the bender of all benders, even without your powers. Some may want revenge, but it's the only thing that will stop most of the Equalists from fighting, and it's what Republic City needs. Just for now. What am I meant to do? Korra, you have the rest of the world, and you will do them well. I know how much you care, and I know you'll be a great Avatar. Mako speaks up. The people don't want violence. They want peace, their homes, their lives back. And this is one way we're gonna give it to them, says Asami. I should have seen it before, I know, but I was too caught up in my anger. Most will follow me. We'll handle it, with Beifong's help. See, with this ending, Korra doesn't unlock airbending with a burst of emotion, but by understanding herself and the world more. But more importantly, it was always a little odd that in the show, the problem was violence and bending and not caring about the damage that they do. And Korra kind of solved the problem with more violence and more bending and more property destruction. It's kind of like Lex Luthor insisting that Superman is too powerful and he destroys too many cities, and Superman just destroys New York while fighting him to say, hey, that's not true. Here, she defeated the Equalists and Amon by empathizing with Asami and understanding their concerns and finding another way other than violence, which she always relied on too much. She was symptomatic of the problem, and this is about her growing beyond that. The show also doesn't recognize non-bender concerns as much as it could have. It gives us a non-bender president in the second season, but nothing more. And because it falls apart after Amon's reveal, it suggests that all of this was only motivated by his malice and personality cult. I think we need some more recognition of those systemic issues when putting the Equalists down. Make them lose popular support by giving the moderates what they want, and the radicals won't have the power to do as much anymore. In this rewrite, there are real consequences to the Equalist movement. People don't get their bending back, and there is systemic change. Asami pushing Korra out of Republic City as the price of peace also plays into what I feel is the overarching theme of Legend of Korra, and I'm going to build on this in future videos, that the world is finding a way to work without the Avatar, challenging their role in politics and life. But moving on, Mako finally apologizes to Bolin for how far he took things, and the two reconcile. Mako and Asami are tense, but they shake hands and admit that they don't want to repeat the same mistakes that happened with their own parents. Tenzin hugs Korra, impressed with how she airbend, but then criticizes her form, and then reiterates how proud he is. A team of waterbenders and metalbenders secretly take Amon away, kept inside a metal box and chained still to prevent him waterbending as much as possible. However, Tarlok ambushes the convoy, takes his brother, and the two escape into the sunset on a boat. Tarlok explains the Equalists have been defeated, but they can live out the rest of their lives together. Amon, having lost everything, takes both of their lives. I always really loved that scene. The final scene in the series has Korra sitting on the edge of one of Republic City's massive skyscrapers. She's playing with a small ball of air and wonders if she will ever get her bending back. At which point, Aang appears to her, saying he's proud because at our lowest point, we are open to the greatest change. He doesn't give her bending back like it happens in the show, but he does tell her that the world is full of strange spirits and powers, and that there may be a way to restore them out there. With that tiny glimpse of hope, Korra sets out to discover what that means. I was always disappointed, not that they gave her bending back, but that it happened so easily, literally within 13 minutes of her losing it. I wanted there to be real consequences to the Equalist movement, and allowing her the time to internalize who she is without it was vital. Now, there is evidence to suggest that this was actually a corporate interference decision, not one made by the writers, and you can see how that might have been the case because Korra getting her powers back does feel tacked on right at the end. So maybe there was an earlier draft where she didn't get it back and that was a question for the future, but we don't know. This rewrite also gives stronger arcs to both Mako and Asami. It creates a sort of symmetry between them that plays into the narrative conflict and gives more personal stakes. The reveal of Orochi Sato being an Equalist was good, but Asami being one would have meant so much more, and here it's an arc. Asami is also, well, a little perfect, and making her a little more flawed makes her more interesting. What do you think of this rewrite though? I mean, does it solve your main concerns, and how would you rewrite it? And if you do love writing, like me, then Campfire is something designed for you. It's a platform created by writers for writers, with pages for characters and cities and magic systems and timelines, anything you want. But I'm gonna be honest, the best way you decide is to try for free, and you can, so don't just listen to me, click the link down below. I do my best to only take sponsors I feel are going to be valuable to you, and these guys, well, they definitely do that. I personally really like the character design stuff, and I found that the interface is a lot more accessible than other systems. It lets you keep track of everything and integrate it all so you can see when two characters never interact, a la the only time Legolas and Frodo ever speak to each other.
And you have my bow.
As well as who is dead and alive at any given time. But that is all. Stay nerdy, and I'll see you in the future.